The funny thing about being invisible is that people stop whispering when you're around. They think you don't matter enough to notice. I learned that lesson on a Tuesday afternoon in Chicago while holding a tray with 2 turkey wraps and an iced tea I couldn't afford. The laughter started before I even reached the corner table. Not loud laughter. The worst kind. The kind people try to hide behind coffee cups and laptop screens. The kind that says they know exactly what they're doing. I kept walking anyway. 29 years old, plus size, and working as a junior data analyst at a financial consulting firm had taught me a valuable survival skill. Pretend you don't hear it. Pretend the comments slide off your skin. Pretend words don't weigh anything. Hey, Emily, one of the marketing guys called out as I passed. Don't eat all the snacks before the meeting. A few people chuckled. Someone else snorted into their coffee. I smiled because that was easier than explaining how tired I was of being everyone's favorite joke. The office occupied the 34th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Chicago. Every morning, sunlight bounced off neighboring skyscrapers and flooded the building with gold. Every morning, I told myself today would be different. Today people would notice my work before they noticed my body. Today someone would ask about the reports I spent 12 hours perfecting instead of making another joke about donuts. Today never came. I set my lunch down at an empty table near the window and opened my laptop. Numbers were easier than people. Numbers followed rules. Numbers didn't judge you before you spoke. My inbox contained 73 unread emails, 3 urgent requests, and 1 message marked confidential. That last one caught my attention immediately. The sender field was blank. No name, no department, no company signature, just an attachment labeled review_this. I frowned. Most people would have deleted it. Maybe I should have. But curiosity has always been my greatest weakness. Outside, gray clouds rolled across the Chicago skyline. Inside, the office buzzed with conversation about quarterly forecasts, client presentations, and weekend plans nobody had invited me to. I clicked the attachment. A spreadsheet opened. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Transaction records, account numbers, payment schedules, the kind of data I analyzed every day. Then I noticed something strange. A series of transfers repeated across multiple pages. Small amounts, scattered dates, different accounts, individually meaningless. Together, not meaningless at all. My stomach tightened. I leaned closer to the screen. The pattern wasn't obvious. It was buried beneath thousands of legitimate transactions, hidden inside layers of financial noise. Whoever created it didn't want anyone finding it. I checked the totals, then checked them again. My pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. The missing amount wasn't a few $1,000s. It wasn't even a few $100,000. The discrepancy was approaching $10 million. 10 million. I stared at the number as office chatter faded into the background. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd missed a decimal point. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But deep down, I already knew something bigger was happening. Then another email appeared. No sender. No signature. Just 6 words. Look deeper. They haven't found it. A chill crawled down my spine. I looked around the cafeteria. Nobody seemed interested in me. Nobody seemed to notice my screen. Yet for the first time all day, I had the uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching. And somehow, despite being the woman everyone called a fat nobody, I had just stumbled into something worth $10 million. I should have ignored it. That was the thought running through my head for the next 3 hours as I sat at my desk, pretending to work on quarterly reports while my attention kept drifting back to the mysterious spreadsheet hidden behind 3 minimized windows. Outside, rain had started tapping softly against the glass walls of the building. The gray afternoon light made everything feel colder. My coworkers complained about the weather. Someone ordered expensive coffee for the team. Nobody invited me to join. Normally that would have bothered me. Today I barely noticed. $10 million had a way of rearranging priorities. I opened the file again and studied the transactions line by line. The transfers were designed to disappear. Hundreds of small movements spread across dozens of accounts. Individually harmless. Together they formed something that looked frighteningly deliberate. Whoever built this system understood financial audits. They knew exactly where investigators would look and exactly where they would not. My fingers moved across the keyboard as I built a tracking model. Numbers began connecting themselves like pieces of a puzzle. Every trail eventually led to the same place. Not an account, not a company, a digital shell. An empty structure created solely to hide money before moving it somewhere else. I checked the timestamp history. The transfers had been happening for almost 18 months. My stomach dropped. That meant nobody had noticed for a year and a half. Or worse, someone had noticed and stayed quiet. A burst of laughter erupted from the conference room nearby. Through the glass wall, I could see several executives gathering for a meeting. One of them glanced toward my cubicle. His expression lingered for a second before he looked away. I knew that look. It was the same look I had seen since high school. The look that dismissed me before I opened my mouth. The look that said nobody important sits in the corner cubicle. I focused on the spreadsheet instead. Data did not care what I looked like. Data only cared whether I was right. At 5:30 in the evening, most employees began packing up. Conversations shifted toward dinner reservations, date nights, and plans for the weekend. I stayed. The office slowly emptied until only a few lights remained across the floor. The silence felt different after hours. Cleaner. Honest. Without constant voices, I could finally think. I followed another trail buried deep inside the records. My pulse quickened as a new pattern emerged. The stolen funds were not random. Every transfer happened within minutes of a specific authorization code appearing in the system. The same code. Every single time. I enlarged the data set and froze. The authorization belonged to someone with extremely high clearance. Far higher than mine. Higher than most people in the company. My heartbeat accelerated. This was not a mistake. This was an inside job. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. The city glowed outside the windows. Headlights streamed through wet streets 34 floors below. Chicago looked beautiful from up here. Distant. Untouchable. My screen suddenly flashed with a new notification. Another anonymous email. No greeting. No signature. Just a single sentence. You are looking at the wrong company. I stared at the message. The timestamp showed it had arrived less than 10 seconds earlier. My skin prickled. Someone knew exactly what I was doing. Someone was watching the investigation unfold in real time. My first instinct was fear. My second was curiosity. I reopened the transaction records and examined them from a different angle. Not who received the money, who originally owned it. The answer appeared almost immediately. A name surfaced repeatedly through layers of corporate entities and financial structures. Not directly, never directly, but close enough to leave a shadow. Close enough to reveal influence. I had heard the name before. Everyone in Chicago had. Business magazines mentioned him. Financial analysts discussed him. Politicians pretended not to know him. Damian Romano. The moment his name appeared on my screen, every tiny piece of the puzzle suddenly felt much larger than $10 million. I stared at Damian Romano's name for so long that the screen dimmed and slipped into sleep mode. The reflection staring back at me from the black monitor looked exhausted. My light brown hair had escaped its clip hours ago. Dark circles sat beneath my eyes. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten dinner. Forgotten the rain outside. Forgotten everything except the growing certainty that I was looking at something nobody else had seen. Or something nobody wanted to see. I moved the cursor, and the screen came back to life. Damian Romano. The name remained buried beneath layers of companies, trusts, partnerships, and shell organizations. It was not direct ownership. It was influence. Presence. A fingerprint hidden beneath 10,000 other fingerprints. The more I traced the transactions, the clearer the pattern became. Money disappeared from one location, traveled through a maze of legitimate accounts, then reappeared somewhere it should not have been. Whoever designed the system was brilliant. They understood audits. They understood compliance. Most importantly, they understood human attention. People only notice what they expect to find. Nobody expects theft to hide inside perfection. My phone buzzed against the desk. It was my friend Rachel. Are you still at work? I glanced at the time and nearly laughed. It was almost 9:30. Most of the city had gone home hours ago. Probably, I typed back. Rachel responded immediately. That means yes. Go home, Emily. The spreadsheets will still be there tomorrow. Normally, she would have been right. Tonight felt different. I slipped the phone back into my purse and continued working. Another hour passed. Then another. The office floor had become completely silent. Even the cleaning crew had finished and left. The only sounds were the hum of air conditioning and the occasional tap of rain against the windows. My tracking model continued expanding across the screen. Every answer created 2 new questions. Then I found something strange. A transaction that did not fit. It was small compared to the others. Barely $20,000. Almost invisible. Yet it broke the pattern. Every fraudulent transfer followed a precise sequence except this one. The account numbers differed. The timing differed. The authorization source differed. It was sloppy. Human. My pulse quickened. Whoever was behind the scheme had made a mistake. I followed the trail carefully. One account became two. Two became four. Four became a name. Not a company. Not a trust. A real person. I froze. The name belonged to an executive consultant contracted by 3 different firms connected to the network. Someone important enough to access sensitive systems, but insignificant enough to avoid scrutiny. My heart pounded louder with every document I opened. This was not random. This was not theoretical. There was an actual person sitting at the center of the leak. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time all night, I felt genuinely nervous. Not because of the money, because of what came next. If I was right, then someone had spent 18 months quietly moving millions of dollars through a hidden pipeline. People do not build something that's sophisticated by accident. I printed nothing, saved nothing locally. Instead, I created an encrypted report and stored it inside a protected workspace. The moment I finished, a new email appeared. No sender, no signature, just one sentence. You are closer than anyone else has ever been. A cold sensation traveled down my spine. I checked the system logs. Nobody should have known what I had just discovered. Nobody should have known I was still in the office. Yet somehow they did. My eyes drifted toward the dark windows overlooking Chicago. Thousands of lights stretched across the city below. Somewhere out there was the person sending those messages. Somewhere out there was the person behind the missing money. And somewhere out there was Damian Romano, a man whose shadow seemed to touch every corner of this mystery. Then my monitor flashed again. A new file had appeared inside the anonymous email thread. Its title contained only 3 words. Proof you missed. My finger hovered over the mouse for several seconds before I opened the file. Every instinct told me to shut down my computer, go home, and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, I clicked. The document expanded across my screen. At first glance, it looked like another collection of financial records. Then I noticed something unusual. Someone had highlighted a series of transactions I had already reviewed and connected them using timestamps instead of account numbers. My heartbeat accelerated. I had been tracking where the money moved. Whoever created this file was tracking when decisions were made. The distinction seemed small until I started following the timeline. Suddenly, everything looked different. Executives approved projects within minutes of certain transfers. Contracts appeared immediately before money changed hands. Consulting agreements materialized from nowhere and vanished weeks later. It was like looking at the same city from a different angle and discovering an entirely new skyline. I scrolled deeper. Notes appeared in the margins. Not explanations. Questions. Why was this approval rushed? Who authorized the exception? Why did compliance ignore the warning? Someone had been investigating this long before me. The realization made me sit up straighter. I was not the first person to find the trail. I was simply the first person who had managed to follow it this far. The anonymous sender had not given me answers. They had given me a map. I spent another hour connecting events. Patterns emerged everywhere. Certain names appeared repeatedly. Certain departments interacted far more often than they should have. The executive consultant I had identified earlier remained at the center of everything. Yet the more I analyzed the data, the less he looked like the architect. He looked like a middleman. Useful. Connected. Important. But not the person truly in control. A soft chime echoed from my computer speakers. Midnight. I rubbed my eyes and stared through the rain-speckled windows. Most of Chicago had gone dark. Only scattered office lights remained visible across neighboring towers. Somewhere below, traffic crawled through wet streets. The city felt enormous and lonely at the same time. My stomach growled, reminding me that I had skipped both dinner and dessert. I laughed quietly. $10 million had apparently become more important than food. As I packed my bag, another notification appeared. This time it was not from the anonymous email account. It came from an industry news alert. The headline immediately caught my attention. Romano Holdings announces emergency executive review. I opened the article. The details were vague. Corporate language. Public relations statements. Assurances that operations remained stable. Yet one sentence stood out. Senior leadership had initiated an internal audit involving multiple partner organizations. My pulse quickened. Damian Romano knew something was wrong. Maybe not everything, but enough to launch a review. I read the article twice before closing it. The timing could not be coincidence. Either the leak had finally attracted attention, or someone inside Romano's organization had started asking uncomfortable questions. Neither possibility made me feel better. I shut down my workstation and headed toward the elevators. The office floor was completely empty. My reflection followed me through the dark glass walls. For years I had been invisible here. The woman people overlooked. The woman nobody invited to meetings unless spreadsheets were involved. Yet tonight I carried information that could alter careers, reputations, and perhaps much more. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. As I stepped inside, my phone vibrated. Another anonymous email. 3 words. Check your desk. The elevator suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I pressed the button for the lobby, but my eyes remained fixed on the screen. Check your desk. That was impossible. I had already left my workstation. The doors began closing. Then I hit the emergency open button and stepped back into the empty office. A minute later, I reached my cubicle. Everything looked exactly the way I had left it. Computer off. Chair pushed in. Coffee cup beside the monitor. Then I noticed a plain white envelope resting in the center of my keyboard. It had not been there 5 minutes earlier. Across the front, written in neat black letters, was my name. For a moment, I simply stood there staring at the envelope. The office remained silent around me. Rows of empty desks stretched into darkness beneath the dim security lights. My name sat in the center of the keyboard in neat black handwriting. Not printed. Written. Personal. Deliberate. I looked around the floor, half expecting someone to step out from behind a cubicle and explain that this was some elaborate prank. Nobody appeared. The only sound came from the distant hum of ventilation. Slowly, I reached for the envelope. The paper felt expensive. Thick. Heavy. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of folded stationery. No greeting. No signature. Just a photograph clipped to the page. I pulled it free and felt my breath catch. The image showed a conference room. A polished table. Several executives seated around it. Most faces were unfamiliar. One was not. The executive consultant whose name I had uncovered earlier sat near the center. A red circle had been drawn around him. Beneath the photograph, someone had written 4 words. He is not alone. I unfolded the page completely. Additional notes covered the paper. Dates. Meeting locations. Transaction references. Cross-company partnerships. Whoever assembled this information possessed access far beyond anything available to a junior analyst. My eyes moved from line to line. Every detail supported the theory that the consultant was only one piece of a much larger operation. The realization made my stomach tighten. I had spent days assuming I was getting closer to the source of the leak. Now it seemed I had only found the outer edge. I checked the timestamp on my phone. 12:23 in the morning. Rational people were asleep. Rational people were not standing alone inside an office tower reading anonymous intelligence packets left on their keyboards. Yet there I was. I slipped the photograph back into the envelope and hurried toward the elevator. By the time I reached the parking garage, rain was falling harder. Cold droplets bounced off the concrete as I crossed toward my aging sedan. The city lights blurred against the wet pavement. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the door. Not from fear exactly, from uncertainty. Every answer seemed to generate 2 new mysteries. The drive home took nearly 30 minutes because of the weather. Windshield wipers swept back and forth in steady rhythm, while Chicago glowed beneath clouds and reflected neon. Normally, I listened to music. Tonight, the radio remained off. My thoughts were loud enough. Who was sending the emails? Who left the envelope? Why choose me? The last question bothered me most. Nobody at the company considered me important. Most days, people barely remembered I existed. Yet someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to guide me toward the truth. My apartment building sat on a quiet street several miles from downtown. Nothing glamorous. Just a brick structure with narrow hallways and aging elevators. Home. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, carrying the envelope beneath my jacket. The moment I entered my apartment, my cat Winston greeted me with an offended meow that suggested I had committed a personal betrayal by arriving so late. I laughed despite everything and scratched behind his ears. The simple normality of the moment felt comforting. I made tea, changed into sweatpants, and spread the documents across my kitchen table. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and old books. For the next 2 hours, I reviewed every page. Patterns emerged again. Names connected to names. Companies connected to companies. Then I noticed something hidden among the notes. A reference repeated 3 separate times. Not a person, not an account. A location. Romano Tower. The headquarters of Damian Romano's organization. My pulse quickened. The leak was connected to him. The investigation was connected to him. Somehow, even the anonymous messages seemed connected to him. Then my laptop chimed. A new email had arrived. Unlike the others, this one contained no clues. No documents. No instructions. Just a single sentence. Damian Romano has started asking the same questions you are. The email stayed on my screen long after midnight. Damian Romano has started asking the same questions you are. I read this sentence at least 20 times, hoping it would somehow reveal more if I stared hard enough. It never did. Winston had curled into a ball on the couch and fallen asleep. The tea beside me had gone cold. Outside, the rain finally stopped, leaving the city wrapped in silence. Yet my mind refused to slow down. If the message was true, then somewhere inside Romano Tower an investigation was already underway. That changed everything. Until now I had assumed I was chasing a mystery alone. Now there was someone else following the same trail. Someone with resources, influence, and access far beyond anything I could imagine. I closed the laptop and tried to sleep. I lasted 40 minutes. By 3 in the morning, I was back at the kitchen table reviewing documents. One detail continued bothering me. The executive consultant appeared everywhere, yet the money never stayed with him. It flowed through him, around him, past him, like water moving around a stone. The real beneficiary remained hidden. By sunrise, I had filled 3 notebooks with observations. My eyes burned from exhaustion. My shoulders ached. Still, one thought kept repeating itself. Somebody inside the network was protecting the leak. When I arrived at the office the next morning, the atmosphere felt different. People gathered around televisions mounted in conference rooms. Conversations were quieter, more focused. The financial news channels were discussing a series of executive reviews initiated across multiple companies connected to Romano Holdings. Nobody mentioned missing money. Nobody mentioned internal investigations. But I knew what I was hearing. Questions were spreading. Rachel appeared beside my desk carrying coffee. She set the cup down and frowned. "You look terrible." I laughed. "Thank you." That was not a compliment. She studied me carefully. "Emily, what is going on?" For a moment, I almost told her. Then I remembered the anonymous emails. The photograph. The envelope. The fact that I had no idea who could be trusted. "Just a project," I said. "A really annoying project." She did not look convinced. Around noon, an all-staff meeting was announced. Groans echoed throughout the office. Nobody liked surprise meetings, especially on a Wednesday. We gathered in the main conference room overlooking the skyline. Executives stood at the front while employees filled every chair. I slipped into a seat near the back, the same place I always sat. Invisible. Safe. One executive spoke about market conditions. Another discussed compliance initiatives. Then a third executive took over. His expression was unusually tense. "Over the coming weeks," he said, "certain departments may be asked to assist with information reviews involving external business partners." The room immediately became more attentive. Questions followed. Answers remained vague. Yet one sentence made my pulse jump. Any employee with relevant analytical findings should report them through official channels immediately. Relevant analytical findings. It felt as though the words were directed straight at me. The meeting ended 30 minutes later. People returned to work complaining about corporate politics. Nobody seemed concerned. Nobody seemed to recognize the storm gathering beneath the surface. Back at my desk, I opened the investigation files again. This time I noticed something I had missed before. One of the meeting locations listed in the anonymous documents matched an address scheduled for a review later that afternoon. The timing could not be coincidence. My heart began racing. I checked public records, then corporate schedules, then transportation logs connected to the companies involved. Piece by piece, another pattern emerged. The leak was moving. Whoever controlled it had realized attention was closing in. They were shifting assets, changing routes, erasing traces. I quickly documented everything and added it to my report. The moment I finished, my monitor flickered. A calendar invitation appeared without warning. No sender, no explanation, just a location. Romano Tower. 6th floor. 6 o'clock tonight. Beneath the address was a single line. He wants to see what you found. For the rest of the afternoon, I could not focus on anything except the invitation. Romano Tower. 6th floor. 6 o'clock tonight. The words sat in the corner of my screen like a countdown timer. Every few minutes I glanced at them to make sure they were still there. They always were. By 4 o'clock, my productivity had completely collapsed. Numbers blurred together. Reports remained unfinished. Even the usual office chatter seemed distant. One question drowned out everything else. Who exactly wanted to see me? The message had said he. Not they. Not the investigation team. Not Romano Holdings. He. My mind immediately supplied a name. Damian Romano. The possibility felt absurd. Men like him existed on television screens, magazine covers, and behind closed executive doors. Women like me watched from the outside. We did not receive invitations. We certainly did not receive personal requests. Yet somehow I found myself leaving work 30 minutes early with a folder of notes tucked inside my bag and enough nervous energy to power half the city. The rain had finally stopped. Chicago glowed beneath a pale orange sunset as I drove downtown. Traffic crawled between skyscrapers while headlights reflected across glass and steel. Romano Tower appeared long before I reached it. The building dominated the skyline. 52 stories of dark reflective glass rising above neighboring structures like it belonged to a different world entirely. I parked 2 blocks away because the garage rates were ridiculous and spent the walk questioning every decision that had led me here. By the time I reached the entrance, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. The lobby looked more like a luxury hotel than a corporate headquarters. Marble floors stretched beneath enormous chandeliers. Security desks stood near the entrance. People in tailored suits moved with purpose across the polished space. Meanwhile, I stood there clutching my bag and trying not to look intimidated. A security officer approached. "Can I help you?" I almost turned around right then. Instead, I showed him the invitation on my phone. His expression changed instantly. Not suspicious. Not surprised. Expecting me. "Please follow me, Miss Carter." The elevator ride felt surreal. No stops. No delays. Straight to the 6th floor. When the doors opened, a woman in a navy suit greeted me. "This way." Her tone was professional but polite. She guided me through a series of quiet hallways lined with modern artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything felt expensive, controlled, intentional. Finally, we stopped outside a conference room. "You may go in," she said. Then she walked away. I stared at the door for a moment before pushing it open. The room beyond was larger than my entire apartment. A long table occupied the center. Multiple screens covered one wall. Chicago's skyline filled the windows. 3 people sat near the far end reviewing documents. None of them looked up immediately. I stepped inside and suddenly became painfully aware of every insecurity I had ever carried. My size, my clothes, my nervousness. The feeling returned instantly. The same feeling I experienced every time coworkers laughed behind my back. The certainty that I did not belong. Then one of the men looked up. "Emily Carter?" I nodded. He closed a folder and stood. "We have been trying to identify who discovered the transaction pattern." My stomach tightened. "You know about that?" "We know enough to recognize good work." Before I could respond, the conference room door opened behind me. The atmosphere changed immediately. Not dramatically, quietly, subtly. The way a room changes when everyone becomes aware of the same person at the same moment. I turned. A tall man entered wearing a charcoal suit without a tie. Dark hair, calm expression, sharp eyes that seemed to absorb every detail in seconds. Nobody introduced him. Nobody needed to. Every article, every photograph, every news segment I had ever seen suddenly became real. Damian Romano glanced at the reports spread across the table. Then he looked directly at me. "So," he said quietly, "you are the analyst who found what my experts missed." For a second, I forgot how to speak. Every carefully prepared explanation vanished the moment Damian Romano looked at me. Not because he was intimidating, although he was. Not because of his reputation, although everyone in Chicago knew it. It was the intensity of his attention. Most people glanced at me and immediately decided who I was. He seemed to be doing the opposite. He was studying the evidence first and me second. The distinction mattered more than I wanted to admit. I swallowed and nodded. "I think I found part of it." One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like approval. He took a seat at the head of the table and gestured toward the empty chair across from him. Show me. I sat down carefully and opened my folder. The three analysts already present shifted their attention toward the documents. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through everything. The transaction chains, the authorization codes, the consultant, the hidden timing patterns, the meeting locations. I expected interruptions, challenges, skepticism. Instead, the room remained almost completely silent. Occasionally someone asked a question. Occasionally Damien requested clarification. But nobody dismissed me. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody treated me like the least important person in the room. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. By the time I finished, every page of evidence had been spread across the table. One analyst leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. We reviewed some of these records 3 separate times. Another shook his head. We never connected the timing sequence. Heat rushed into my cheeks. Part of me expected them to discover a mistake, a flaw, something that would prove I did not belong here after all. Instead, Damien reached for one of the reports and studied it again. How long have you been working on this? A few days. His eyes lifted immediately. A few days? I nodded. After the anonymous file appeared, the room became very quiet. One of the analysts exchanged a glance with another. Damien remained expressionless. Anonymous file? He asked. I realized then that perhaps I should not have said that part out loud. Yet it was too late to take it back. I explained the emails, the spreadsheet, the envelope, the photograph, the notes. As I spoke, the expressions around the table grew increasingly serious. When I finally finished, Damien folded his hands together. You kept all of this? Yes. Good. Just one word. Good. Yet somehow it carried more validation than years of performance reviews. He stood and walked toward the windows overlooking the city. Night had fully settled across Chicago. Thousands of lights stretched into the distance beneath a dark sky. For several moments he said nothing. Then he turned back toward the room. The consultant is not the source. Relief flooded through me. I thought so too. One of the analysts looked surprised. You did. The money never stays with him, I explained. It passes through him. He is connected to the leak, but he benefits too little compared to the risk. Damien's gaze remained fixed on me. Exactly. My heart skipped. Exactly. Not close. Not interesting. Exactly. Nobody had ever used that word about my work before. The realization hit harder than I expected. For years I had been the person hidden in the corner cubicle. The person nobody listened to during meetings. The person people joked about when they thought I could not hear them. Yet here, in the most intimidating room I had ever entered, my ideas were being taken seriously. Damien returned to the table and placed a business card in front of me. No title, no company logo, just his name and a private number. I want you to continue. I stared at the card. Continue. The leak is moving. Whoever is behind it knows pressure is increasing. He glanced toward the evidence. You see patterns others miss. That makes you valuable. Valuable. The words settled somewhere deep inside me. Before I could respond, another analyst entered the conference room carrying a tablet. His expression was tense. Sir, he said, we found something. Damien accepted the device and reviewed the screen. The calm confidence vanished from his face for the first time that evening. Then he looked directly at me. Your theory was right. My pulse quickened. About what? He set the tablet on the table between us. A familiar name stared back from the screen. The consultant was gone from the investigation trail, replaced by someone far more powerful. The name on the tablet belonged to a senior executive whose face appeared regularly on financial news programs. Someone respected, trusted, the kind of person nobody questioned because questioning them felt impossible. I stared at the screen while the room fell silent. Suddenly, every piece of the puzzle made sense. The consultant had been a shield, a distraction, a convenient target standing between investigators and the real source. One of the analysts muttered something under his breath. Another leaned back in disbelief. Damien Romano remained calm, but I could see the change in his eyes. The uncertainty was gone. For the first time since I arrived, he looked like a man who knew exactly where to look next. You found the gap, he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, yet every person in the room immediately focused on him. Then he looked at me. Without that timing sequence, we would have missed this entirely. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. not a manager, not a professor, not anyone. I spent so many years trying to prove I belonged in rooms where people had already decided I did not. Hearing those words felt unreal. The following week passed in a blur. Investigations expanded. Audits multiplied. Internal reviews spread across multiple organizations connected to the network. I remained involved, providing analysis whenever requested. Every day brought another discovery, another connection, another missing piece sliding into place. Yet the strangest part was not the investigation. It was how differently people treated me. The same coworkers who barely acknowledged me before suddenly wanted my opinion. Managers who never remembered my name now stopped by my desk. Some were sincere, others were not. I could tell the difference. One Monday morning, the company announced a joint presentation involving senior executives and outside partners. Attendance was mandatory. By noon, the main conference hall was packed. Hundreds of employees filled the room. Conversations echoed beneath bright lights. I recognized many faces. Some belonged to people who had supported me. Others belonged to people who had spent years making me feel small. I took a seat near the back, exactly where I always sat. Old habits are difficult to break. Then a coordinator approached. "Emily." I looked up. "Yes. Your seat is up front." I thought she had the wrong person. She had not. 5 minutes later, I found myself seated beside department leaders and senior analysts while confused whispers spread throughout the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. Across the hall, I noticed one of the marketing employees who used to joke about me during lunch breaks. He looked genuinely confused. The presentation began. Executives discussed compliance improvements, financial recovery efforts, and organizational restructuring. Most of it sounded like standard corporate language. Then the final speaker was introduced. The room immediately grew quiet. Damian Romano stepped onto the stage. He thanked several teams for their work. He acknowledged analysts, auditors, investigators, and consultants. Then he paused. "There is one person," he said, "whose contribution changed the direction of this entire investigation." The room became completely silent. My pulse accelerated. Damian looked directly toward the front row, toward me. The breakthrough did not come from a senior executive. It did not come from a highly paid consultant. It came from someone who noticed what everyone else overlooked. Every eye in the room turned. Heat rushed into my face. I wanted to disappear beneath the chair. Instead, Damian continued. Emily Carter identified patterns that experienced professionals missed. Her work revealed the truth when others could not see it. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. For the first time in my life, an entire room saw me for something other than my appearance. They saw my work, my effort, my mind. After the presentation ended, people approached to congratulate me. Some were genuine. Some were awkward. Some seemed embarrassed by how they had treated me before. I accepted every handshake politely. Then I stepped outside onto the terrace overlooking Chicago. The afternoon sun reflected off the skyline. Wind tugged gently at my hair. A few moments later, Damian joined me. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I laughed softly. "Honestly, I am still trying to believe any of this happened." He nodded toward the city below. "People spend too much time judging what they can see." I followed his gaze across the skyline, and not enough time noticing what matters. A faint smile appeared on his face. Exactly. Standing there, looking out across the city, I realized something important. The investigation had changed many things. Careers, companies, reputations. But the biggest change was simpler than all of that. For years I believed being overlooked meant I had no value. It turned out the right person simply had not been paying attention yet.